interesting, I sort of sat around last night trying to think of what to do, and came across some older songs that I hadn't sung in a while, and one written about a year ago. There was something about it I liked, but there were some things that I didn't like, so I rewrote it a little. So it's kind of new and old all at the same time. So we'll see what happens. It was written in DC? Yeah, I think it was written in British Columbia.
You wrote it?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, everything you're going to hear, I'm responsible for. I look outside the window, summer's done and gone. Don't come as much surprise that now you're moving on. Lord, you know it ain't easy, but I'll survive. 'Cause deep in our hearts, love remains alive. And I'm going to where wild mountains climb high above the clouds, fall down to the oceans to get lost in mists and shrouds. It's not that I'd forget you, but now that you have gone, life it simply carries on. I step outside the open door, winter's in the air. I watch you walk away, the pain is hard to bear. Lord, you know it ain't easy, but I will survive. 'Cause deep in our hearts, love remains alive. And I am going to where wild mountains climb high above the clouds and fall down to the oceans to get lost in mists and shrouds. It's not that I'd forget you, but now that you have gone, life, it simply carries on. So this goes much further back. I can't really remember.
I will read the letter this morning that we didn't get to in Rochester this past Monday. A few things are left out which are personal. The letter is addressed, Dear Toni and friends at Springwater. The past year has been a rather tumultuous one for me, and much of the tumult has come since the spring retreat. At that time, I was working for a co-op in a collectively managed restaurant. Soon after the retreat, however, a series of events led me into what might be called a crisis of conscience, in the course of which it became clear to me that I ought to leave my job and take on my present task of helping operate a hospitality house for homeless people with medical problems. Were it not for the availability of a service such as ours, and there is only one other similar place here in DC, these people would be released from the hospital following illness, injury, surgery, etc., directly onto the streets or into emergency shelters. I have also in the past few months felt increasingly compelled to speak and act non-violently in opposition to the ideologies and institutions that serve to justify and routinize the more gross forms of violence and oppression we see all around us in poverty and war. Again, it is primarily the internal pressure of conscience, in quotation marks, that has moved me in this direction, though of course certain words, individuals, and events have contributed to the awakening of this force. Far from being in conflict with my, in quotation marks, meditative inquiry, as you now put it, this increased activism has made me ever more aware of the need for silence and stillness, and the attentiveness that can bring these qualities into our daily lives. And the converse stands true for me as well, that in silence and stillness, we become naturally aware that this life is a gift, a grace, if you will. When we come to truly appreciate a thing, I think we come quite naturally to tend to its needs, to cherish and to protect it, be it a flower, a child, or a planet. To be silent and still before the brutal beating of a child could scarcely be called attentive, nor could it be an expression of love, unless somehow responding would make matters worse. I have heard you speak of the limits of bare attention while discussing our obvious need to attend to all manner of mundane tasks, carry on discussions, make decisions, plans for the future, catch buses, and so forth. But I don't recall ever having heard you address this question of conscience in these terms. Simply put, does conscience expose elements of reality, of our lives, that bare attention fails to uncover? Does conscience expose elements of reality of our lives that bare attention fails to uncover? Let me give you an example that might help you to consider the question and frame your answer. I have before me 2 blank checks. I take up a pen and most attentively scrawl out the date, an amount of $500, and sign it. I repeat the act with a second check. I hear the tap of the pen on paper, see the trail of ink lengthen, feel my muscles flex from the tips of my fingers back to my triceps. The one appreciable difference between these 2 acts is that I am writing one for the Springwater Center to support meditative inquiry, whereas the other is made out to the Internal Revenue Service. The latter money will be used, among other things, to support the development, deployment, and eventual use of nuclear and biological weapons, the Cuban-American death squads in El Salvador, the Contra terrorists in Nicaragua, and any number of covert programs you and I know nothing of. Let me make clear my own sense that I'm not talking about issues or policies or abstractions of any kind. I'm talking about taking pen in hand and signing over money to these people, these purposes. Certainly on the level of purely rational ideation, we appreciate the difference between these 2 most similar acts, but I personally experienced the difference most vividly in an awakening of conscience that combines an awareness of the preciousness of life with outrage and sadness at our callous betrayal of that gift. And it is conscience that ultimately would allow my sending you such a check, but not the IRS. No love I know subsidizes fear and murder. But what has bare attention to say of all this? To things are questioned in this letter, among other things. And one is conscience, what is conscience? And the other, what is bare attention? Have they any relationship with each other, and if so, what? Or no relationship with each other, where one leaves off, like bare attention, then conscience enters. Is that so? The person asks. It's true, I don't remember ever using the word conscience at all. Because to me, the concept or phenomenon of conscience, a good conscience, the feeling of a good conscience, a clean conscience, or a guilty conscience, a burdened conscience, is linked up with conditioning. To me, the way I feel about the word and would use it or not use it, it is not, the phenomenon of conscience is not clear seeing or the intelligence that comes out of clear seeing, but a response to conditioning. All of us, wherever we live and at whatever time we have lived, or human beings have lived in time, there has been training, education, indoctrination of the young from almost day one. Through what the parents consider right and wrong. And their consideration of what is right and wrong stems from what they have imbibed as children, from their parents, from the family, the social class one lives in, the country one lives in, the prevailing ideology one lives with, the religious doctrines and indoctrination one is subjected to. And these change from social class. We can name infinite groups, I will not go into that, from one social class to another, from one society to another, from one country to another, and within a country from one time to another. Things at the time of the Third Reich in Germany under the Hitler administration, acts that were considered highly moral for the sake of the super race, for the sake of the leader or the ideology of National Socialism, were later condemned in a public court hearing as highly immoral, totally immoral, absolutely immoral, and the still surviving leaders were put to death. And in Germany too, now under a new government, certain acts that were moral then and that in good conscience when performed are now would invoke a guilty conscience. One is born as a communist, one has a different conscience social conscience or individual conscience as if one is born as a capitalist. The whole moral value of individualism, highly regarded and admired in Western industrial countries, rugged individualism, competitiveness. In certain Indian tribes, this is of the very devil, to be individually standing out. They are the consciences of the group. We read that it's very similar in Japan. The company or the country or the religious unit is the not the individual, but the submergence into that is of moral value. Submitting and surrendering to that. Last night, a few of us were together watching an old movie. It was called A Man for All Seasons. A very interesting movie with regard to this matter of conscience. Maybe a lot of you have seen it. The historical setting is the time of Henry VIII, who tried to establish a new religious lineage, if we may say, by becoming head of the Church of England and breaking with the lineage of the Pope. And the supporter and defender of that lineage, Thomas More, who could not, in good conscience, justify anything that was not law under that particular, the rules of that lineage, tracing from Jesus to Saint Peter and down the papal line. A belief in that, and a belief in that transmission, and therefore a total identification of conscience with what was done through rules and edicts and laws that developed in that lineage, the papal lineage, Catholic Church. The morality based on belief and the defending of that morality unto death. Not because an act was seen to be right or wrong, but because the rules in which one believes and in where they come from a God in whom one believes, or his Son in whom one believes, has been instrumental in that tradition, has given the laws through the Church. And to stick with this was to keep the conscience clean. To deviate from it, to support something contrary in opposition to it, was to have would be a guilty conscience, which is also an aspect of conscience, the fear of punishment. If I don't act in accordance with what my conscience tells me is right or wrong, which is in accordance with what I believe to be right or wrong, have been trained and indoctrinated to see as right or wrong, if I don't act in accordance with that, I will be punished. Either by men or women of power or by God. That was the one fear pervading the thoughts of Thomas More, of offending God, of not going to heaven after death. And if we don't think it through very carefully, our admiration for a person who stands for what he thinks, for what he believes, and giving his life for that, the strength of that, we admire. But to see how, as long as we believe, have any kind of belief, our feelings of conscience will be in accordance with that belief, and our feelings of right and wrong will be in accordance with that belief. Or unquestioned conditioning. We've often talked about guilt. We haven't talked about conscience, but about guilt. We've often questioned whether there was the absolute assurance we could feel, which we never can feel. But if there was this absolute assurance that no one would find out, no one would punish us, including circumstances, painful circumstances, which are also felt as punishment. If that wasn't there, would we have a guilty conscience? What we refer to as guilty conscience. Or is it the fear of punishment, the fear of pain we may produce, or the fear of what people would think of us, may gossip about us, that produces this guilty conscience? In which case we're still tied to images. But we'll leave that aside for the moment. We want to discuss what this person brought up. What does bare attention have to say about this? Actually, we are paying attention now to this whole issue. We're looking at it together. Not just paying attention to the breath that is needed to say the words, or to the sensations in the knee or in the throat, which may be somewhat dry, or the temperature. That's not all that bare attention is. It may be misunderstood to be that, and it's good to bring this up so we can clarify it. Bare attention is not limited to the sensations of this moment. Sensing, as I write a check, all that's beautifully described here. That's not the limits of attention. The understanding of where the check goes to, what happens to the money, one's feelings about it that arise, approval or disapproval, or outrage, they're all revealed in attention. They're not separate from the sound of the pen, or the sight of the trail of ink, or the feeling of the triceps. Why do we make that separation? Is it because we've heard so much about that state of being in which there's no movement of thought, that we think all thought cannot possibly be attentive, cannot possibly be within the realm of awareness? This is worth looking at and discussing, so there's no confusion in the mind, a conceptual confusion which leads to has consequences. taking this example again. Why does one have to introduce a new concept, like the awakening of conscience? Which is all right if one is very clear about what the word denotes, what it refers to in actuality, and what it does not refer to but is commonly associated with a word, so that uttering a word without clarification doesn't evoke these associations in the minds of people who hear or read the word. We've just gone through a very common use and understanding of the word conscience. So here we're asking, why does one have to bring in a new term? Why does not awareness suffice? Unless one is assuming that attention, bare attention, can only be of sensations. What is actually felt, heard, seen at this moment. And if one feels this limitation, why is it limited? Because of a concept, this is attention and something else is not. Can that itself come into awareness, be attended to? The feeling of limitation, which is caused through our use of language, concepts, attention versus conscience. It is a fact, even though one has to think about it in order to see it, that money, tax money given to the IRS supports what this man is listing here: war, destruction. It's also a fact that this money, which is sent to the IRS, supports the national parks, national forests, highways, medical payments, all kinds of other things which are not outrageous. I'm not defending what the government is doing or not doing, but to look at things factually. Or realize that we don't know all the facts. This was the topic of last Monday's talk, part of the topic of the acid rain. You may get the tape and listen to it. The letter will be published the letter that was responded to by me will be published in the next newsletter. So to understand the facts, is that outside of attention, outside of awareness? Or to be aware that we don't know all the facts? Where's the separation? Does that come, I'm asking again, from previous spiritual training, which says the mind must be blank in order to be enlightened or to see clearly? There must be no thought. Therefore, any movement of thought cannot be of that enlightened awareness. Or is it that one does need a word for this thinking which comes out of seeing the facts clearly and acting out of seeing facts clearly? It doesn't matter what word one uses, does it? What is important is that one sees the conditioning which makes us think this is right, this is wrong, this makes me feel bad, this makes me feel good. To see how conditioned we are in our feelings and thoughts and emotions, in our feelings of guilt, or the absence of guilt. The King Henry in the movie yesterday, by establishing himself as the head of the church, was dropping this whole problem for himself. And because he was the king and was wearing huge robe, 3 times the size of a quarterback football player, wide shoulder, golden, sparkling, and the power of the office, a godlike appearance, power, gold, and now the new title, and the church backing it. The church now also the new power of not being dependent on the Pope and in a foreign country. That is the emergence of a new belief to base one's conscience on. What is right and what is wrong, and who is right and who is wrong in supporting this or resisting it. Can one look at that in one's own life? Uncover beliefs? We are beset with beliefs which just beckon to be uncovered. They don't beckon, but one can uncover them. And with that, what happens if this is seen to be conditioning, our feeling of right and wrong, our feelings of guilt, that they emerge from a conditioned code of morality? This is often what is asked, or used to be asked in Zen, in the Zen connection. Does it mean you become immoral if you embrace this? This religion or this teaching which says there is no right and wrong, that it is all conditioned through thought and habit and the past. And there are Zen koans to the effect of walking away with a farmer's horses, or to vividly express someone who is not tied by any law or condition. And the fear, would this mean anarchy, chaos, immorality? And not just the fear, but misinterpreting freedom from conditioning as license. The freedom to do as one pleases or wants or intuits. Intuition bears looking into too. We use that word very lightly, freely. This is my intuition, to try to get away from looking at why do I really act this way? Where does my action or my intuition that this is what is right, where does it come from? Not slur over it. No one is forced to look into it or keep from slurring over it, but it is, if one wants to find out how and why one acts, one needs to do that. Not substitute a word for looking, the word intuition. I intuitively feel this is right. Where does it come from, this feeling of being right or wrong? From one's desires, what one wants to do, from one's past experience of what has felt good and has left a mark in the mind, the mark of past pleasure or past pain. A dream which is the coming into the dreaming consciousness of pleasurable things, or what one would like to do, which may not be available to the daytime consciousness as too strong repression. But it's the same memory that reacts through thoughts and dreams of pain and pleasure. So we were asking, we were looking at the fear that emerges of what will happen if I have no conditioned standards of right and wrong. Maybe one has seen that our usual standards of right and wrong are socially, traditionally, religiously, ideologically conditioned. Maybe one doesn't see that and has to look at it and examine it for oneself, not take this person's words for it and believe in those. It's just a new set of beliefs. But if it is quite clear that our notions of what is right and wrong, good and bad, are based on what we've been taught or what we have assimilated through reading and experiencing in the past, then the question, what will happen if there's freedom from conditioning? Either the fear of chaos or the desire for that freedom to do as one wants, which we have just examined, may also stem from the conditioning of our own wanting. Our wanting conditions us, and our fears condition us from moment to moment. Is that a theoretical question? What will happen if? It is, isn't it? It's a speculative question. Because if there is freedom of conditioning, which is the fullness, the wholeness of awareness, without the me wanting this or fearing that me being quiet, that whole me program is quiet, is in abeyance. In that freedom or fullness of awareness, wholeness of awareness, one sees what needs to be done or what needs not to be done. What harms, what hurts, what causes pain, what causes division. What causes conflict, conflagration in oneself and among us, among each other. That's seen to be actually, factually so. It can be observed as happening, as it has happened in the past, if one factually examines memory, history, personal history, past human history, the facts of that, as factually as it has been collected. Often our history is not very factually collected. Personal or general history has often slants. Most of history taught is slanted, taught my country, its glory, and so is our personal history and our memory slanted. So it's not to be relied on too heavily, the facts of our personal history. Unless one can see the tendency to slant and then look at a fact without that slant, if that's possible. Of course it's possible. then is that the operation of conscience? Or, if you wanted to name it that, then to disassociate conscience from any conditioned base, from any base of belief or indoctrination. Because the clarity of seeing and the seeing being the acting or not acting has nothing to do with conditioning. It cannot take place as long as there is the operation of belief or want or fear. Then there's slanting and relying on personal want or the morals or the reaction against the morals of the society in which one lives, or the religious codes. And this, the clarity of seeing, which is free from conditioning, or which unravels, uncovers the conditioned responses as being so, and therefore the breaking of that pattern. That clarity of seeing is not separate from attention and awareness. It is that. As long as one does not limit the concept of attention just to the sensing of different sensations, the experiencing of different sensations. We've been through that. I remember once, just the memory comes up in a previous teaching situation, not at this place, at another place, where somebody said, many years ago, when there was the beginning of this split from the traditional teaching, the traditional forms, the person said, I don't think I can go along with you because all you seem to be talking about is sensations, listening, seeing, hearing, feeling. And there must be more to this work, or whatever word that person used, than just sensing. And he's right. It's not just sensing. It is no sensor, no one there to do the hearing or the seeing, which means no interpretation of it, and no separation of the hearing from the seeing, from the feeling, from the touching. It's a wholeness of perception, which is not of this or of that. That would be two. I perceive the sound of the bird, but it isn't so. That wholeness of perception which does not exclude the fact that one check goes to the Internal Revenue and knowledge about where this money goes, or the absence of facts about it. It's all included. It's all perceivable, either as knowledge or as directly seen fact, directly heard or seen fact. But no one there who's separate, who judges, who condemns, or opposes. But this needs further clarification, I think. because often it's misunderstood. People say, well, then if you are to become one with everything, does it mean you go along with everything? With war? Registering, what is it called, with a draft? Or would saying no to war mean opposition and condemnation? Would it? Are we caught in words? In concepts? Can one see war factually for what it is? What are the roots of it? What contributes to it? It doesn't need any condemnation to say no to it. As it manifests in oneself. It doesn't take. One doesn't have to take up a gun in order to fight the guns. Even if a gun were pointed at one. Is that the bottom line where at this point one picks one's own gun and shoots back in self-defense? With which the chain reaction continues, doesn't it? Revenge and counter-revenge. The righteous cause for which, the righteous war for which one can fight, in which one can fight, it doesn't make sense, does it? War is war. And the righteousness of it is conditioned. By history, by, the whole of human history. So what about sending a check to the IRS? It's often asked this question. It may not be a check, it may be postage for one's letters. Although I think the budget in this country is such that the Post Department keeps its own money. Postage money is not part of the general budget. I'm not completely informed about this. But what is one to do if every little tax one pays to the federal government, however small it is, 20 or 30, whatever the percentage goes into the war machinery? Actually, not only does the money we pay in tax go to the war machinery, we don't know anymore what companies belong to each other, control each other. In our private spending, we may be supporting weapons without knowing. And where are we going to go where this is not the case? Is there any place left on this planet? Maybe a few islands, but then they belong to somebody too. The people on the Falkland Islands probably thought in their sheep herding they were safe until huge fleets arrived to capture them back. Where is one going to go? Recently saw an item on the news where practically every industrialized country is a supplier of arms, and it's the most lucrative business in the world. supplying arms to anybody who's buying it, because for business there is that moral that making money is. You have a good conscience if you make money for your stockholder or yourself, and a bad conscience if you don't do this. And what does it matter what one produces or where it goes? It's not part of that moral system. Neutral countries, Switzerland, prospering through the arms and monies involved in their banks. It was amazing. I don't know whether some of you saw this item on the news, whether it was 60 Minutes or... Everybody who can build some arms ships them and sells them. Any place. And not even knowing where they go, to somebody who will transport them. Wholesale, the retail. So where is one going to go where one is not somewhere implicated in arms trafficking and war supporting? I don't know whether there is such a place. And if there is today, it may not be tomorrow. So, where are we in this? What are we going to do? In spite of the fact that we are somehow implicated by supporting it through everything we buy or paying tax, because if we don't pay tax, we'll be put in jail. What good is that? Can all of this be clear? And if there's confusion, to work with it, to investigate. Not just put words on the confusion and therefore expediently shove it away and continue creating confusion in ourselves and our relationships. It's not so difficult to see and look and question. It's not so difficult. It's our resistances to it, because they impinge on our private, personal lives. We're either afraid where this will lead us, or the questioning and the looking interrupts a habitual or pleasurable or safety pattern. Interrupts it, because in order to look, we have to look at something, and it can't just roll on unawares. It can't. Then there's no looking. But the rolling on unawares is what gives us some comfort or pleasure, or feeling of an ill-founded feeling of security. Because eventually we're going to crash or come into conflict. So if it's just a fear, where will this lead me? That's thought. That's image. Why not find out? And if it's looking at something that's running so satisfactorily or safely, feeling security in it or pleasure, will one give some attention to it? what is running at the same time, what is happening, the consequences. Not judgmentally, not afraid, but factually, what is there, so that there's insight, understanding, and the freedom of action, which is not the freedom of doing what feels most pleasurable or comfortable, but where is no choice. This is what the facts are. So can the action be in accordance, not with rules and maxims and morals, but with what's actually so. And if one doesn't see all the facts, or they're hidden or not available, then to hesitate. To be cautious, careful. Not suppose or assume that one knows. By supplying oneself facts. We do this so often. To be aware of that. Then we don't fall for it. Here, this person wrote this. Put this well. In silence and stillness, we become naturally aware that this life is a gift. Of course, one can fall into thought again there. It's what it is. A gift meaning something precious. The beauty of it. The wholeness of it. When it's not interfered with what I want to get out of it for myself or my family, country. He says when we come to truly appreciate a thing, I think we come quite naturally to tend to its needs, to cherish and to protect it. Be it a flower, a child, or a planet. It's not so difficult. It comes out of that stillness of being there with it as no one who wants something out of it. Is that the difficulty? Always wanting to get something out of it. Out of the flower, out of the child, out of the man or the woman. Out of this earth, out of my life. I want to get something out of it. And we're perpetually in problems. Dissatisfaction, greed, wanting more or not getting what we want. Comparison with others who seem to get what I don't have. What's the absence of that for one moment? Of not wanting. And nothing is cut up. Is this now setting up the ideal of no wanting and wanting that? See it instantly, that's enough. There is a question period in Rochester tomorrow night, a discussion period, also a discussion period next Sunday, I believe, and on Monday a talk. In these discussion periods, please bring up things if there was something that seemed unclear or false, not so in the talk, so that we can carry on with the inquiry. Maybe not carry on, but start afresh. We will end here for today.
For me, when this thing finally gets in tune, it's such a treat. Kind of verse. I'd like to play a little bit, like patty cake play. Believe it or not, I love doing that. I'm sure you can believe it. Nodding off is wonderful to do, so. Shut off the speakers behind me?
Yeah.
They sound like
You still feel like you're not going to do?
yes. There was just a
Which is gone.
debated a long time whether or not I should do a blues or not. And I decided I wasn't gonna, but I guess I will anyway. It's like all of it's sort of got that kind of ambience to it. What's that? Right. Well, I don't know if it's going to be that kind of blues. think one more on the 12 string and then quit.